I'll get started because I know people are on their lunch break. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Hygiene in High Places. We're so excited to have you here. Whether you're tuning in from a mountain town, a van down by the river, or your office pretending to work, we are psyched you've joined us for this really important, sometimes awkward, but always essential conversation. Today, we're diving into backcountry hygiene, from practical tips to the social dynamics of handling this subject in the field. Whether you're a guide, a weekend warrior, or just someone who's tired of suffering through day 3 of funk and silence, this webinar is for you. We've got 3 incredible panelists today, all bringing a unique perspective from the world of guiding, outdoor education, and women's leadership in the outdoors. First up, Anastasia Allison. Anastasia is a former park ranger and police officer turned backpacking instructor, speaker, and self-proclaimed adventurepreneur, a term she coined to describe her mission of using wilderness as a catalyst for personal transformation. She's the founder of Kula Class, a lifelong hiker and climber, and someone who believes that mountains aren't just a destination, but a mirror for possibilities. Next, we're joined by Heidi Skildum, the National Program Manager for She Jumps, a nonprofit committed to increasing the participation of women and girls in the outdoors. Heidi has built her life and career around making the outdoors more inclusive and accessible. When she's not organizing educational outdoor experiences or skiing volcanoes, you'll find her cuddling with her pup Luz, experimenting in the kitchen with her husband. And finally, Morgan McGonigal, lead guide at Alpine Ascents and full-time mountain badass. Morgan's guiding career has taken her from the Rockies to the Cascades with a pit stop in New England for a degree in mechanical engineering and some D1 rugby. She now spends her winters patrolling at Crystal, teaching avalanche courses, and somehow still finds time to sing in a band, sew hats, bake bagels, and find whatever snow is left in the state. We'll get started in just a moment, but a couple of notes as we get started. If you have any questions at all, you can drop them in the Q&A box, and we will circle back and answer as many as we can at the end. Do keep an eye out on the chat. We'll be dropping in helpful links and resources throughout the discussion. And, me. I'm Mary. I'm the guide manager at Alpine Ascents. And I didn't prepare a bio for myself, so that's all you're going to get. Anastasia, over to you.
Sounds great. I am just excited to be here and to get the chance to chat with everybody about pooping, peeing, and periods outside. I'm also an alpine climber here in the Pacific Northwest. I've climbed all of the volcanoes many times each. And my personal passion is off-trail high routes. So I've done the Wind River High Route. I'm always up for a good off-route scramble. Anything sketchy, I usually end up finding myself in the vicinity of it. So I am going to today talk about hygiene, but with a sort of increased perspective on how you can increase your hygiene preparedness on a climb. Mary, did you want me to go ahead and share my screen? And okay, cool. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started here. Here we go. So here's me. Mary already gave me a great intro, so we're not going to belabor this anymore. I've just spent a lot of time outside. I forgot toilet paper on my very first backpacking trip. And I'm also sort of slightly embarrassed to admit that my very first backpacking trip was also a climb of Kulshan or Mount Baker. Don't recommend that at all to anybody, but there was an older gentleman leading that climb, and I was worried that he'd kick me off of the climb if he knew how little experience I had, rightly so. And I was honestly afraid to tell him that I didn't know how to poop or pee outside. And so I just assumed that there was going to be toilet paper in the backcountry. I realized the severity, literal severity of my mistake about halfway through my dehydrated meal that night. And I'd love to tell you that I confessed this to everybody, but no, I was so embarrassed that I stole toilet paper from my tent mate. And that single incident has impacted literally the course of my life, because I realized realized that I did not go out into the backcountry to worry about pooping and peeing, and yet our hygiene plays such a critical role in how well that trip goes and how connected of an experience that we can have in the backcountry. So what we're all doing right now is we are preparing for everything to go right. All of you are going to go out into the backcountry prepared, confident, and empowered to be able to handle your hygiene, but also to look out for others. So I'm going to quickly read a little bit of a study that was done. This is one of the longest term studies that was done on actual climbers on Denali. This was a study done by Wilderness Medicine Institute of Knowles, which is the National Outdoor Leadership School. It said that the Center for Disease Control surveyed climbers on Denali in Alaska in response to reports of diarrhea. They found that 29% of climbers had diarrhea at least once on the mountain. Less than half of the climbers said they habitually wash their hands after defecating, and 25% confessed to never washing their hands. A disgraceful 11% confessed to pooping directly into the snow near their camps, not in a crevasse or in a poop pail, as suggested by the Park Service. The authors recommended people on these popular routes be educated on communicable disease and hygiene, disinfect their water, wash hands after a bowel movement, and certainly before meals. Now, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're out on a mountain climbing trip or prepping for it. The amount of both financial investment, time investment, fitness investment, gear investment, mental investment that goes into prepping and planning for a mountain climbing trip is huge. And yet we spend most of the time thinking about like, okay, what type of boots am I going to wear? And the thing that has the ability to send a lot of folks home or end a trip really quickly is improper hygiene. And so that's what we're going to talk about today so that nobody has to go home because of improper hygiene. So why is it so important? The effects of poor hygiene, they could start out on the small end with chafing, urinary tract infections, yeast infections, discomfort, illness, emotional distress. I personally have experienced that. And injury is also included in here because when you are on a mountain, it's so important that your head is in the game, that you're focused, and that you're paying attention to the environment around you. If you're distracted worrying about how uncomfortable you are, or if you're worried about whether or not you're going to have to steal more toilet paper from your tent mate, your head isn't in the game. You're much more likely to be prone to doing something that could cause an injury. As we enter the backcountry, I want to encourage all of you to think of yourself as leaders. When that man led my group out into the backcountry, he made some pretty big assumptions when he put together that group. And his big assumption was everybody here knows how to handle their hygiene in the backcountry. So whether you are heading out on a guided climb or whether you are heading out to climb a peak with friends, really checking ourselves and making sure that we aren't making assumptions about what the other people in our group might know or might feel comfortable asking about. I didn't feel comfortable asking about my hygiene. And so we can get rid of these assumptions by asking open-ended questions to the folks in our party, like, hey, everybody, what do you have for your hygiene plan? Just mentioning it is often enough to get the conversation going. So today what we're going to be doing is just briefly going through peeing, pooping periods, and then personal hygiene is sort of included in the mix. So that's when we're talking about cleaning ourselves, how to keep our underwear clean, and making sure that we aren't prone to infection, chafing, discomfort, and illness. So peeing is something that obviously most of us know how to do this at home, pretty easy to do, but when we're in the backcountry, it's a little bit different. So 200 feet or more away from natural water sources and on durable surfaces, if possible. Snow is considered a durable surface by Leave No Trace, so peeing on snow is just fine. If you are peeing, there are usually a couple ways of handling your personal hygiene with regards to peeing. Option one is drip drying, and that is not my preferred method. For a day or so, you might be able to get away with it, but eventually what ends up happening is that your underwear becomes a de facto pee cloth. So all of the moisture that could be being removed from your body is now sort of sitting in there and festering, which is making you much more prone to chafing and infection. This is where the type of underwear that you wear is really important. There's a lot of underwears that have synthetic body, but then they have a cotton crotch, which is sneaky because you think, oh, I'm wearing synthetic underwear, just like the guides told me to pack. No cotton, but that cotton crotch is just going to stay damp and make you much more prone to infection. So making sure that you have synthetic or merino style underwear is going to be really important in keeping your hygiene in really good order while you're out in the backcountry. Also, removal of that moisture. So you can use toilet paper. You can use a pea cloth, and I'm going to stop my screen share for a second to show my unbelievably exciting props. So for my personal toilet paper kit, if I'm using toilet paper for peeing, most importantly, I'm carrying a bag that has my toilet paper in it, but I'm also carrying out a trash bag because I'm not leaving toilet paper anywhere on the mountain. Toilet paper actually takes 1 to 3 years sometimes to biodegrade. It just does not vanish. That includes the quote unquote biodegradable toilet papers that you can find at any outdoor store. That is very much dependent on the environment that you're in, and especially up in fragile alpine places, we don't want to be leaving any toilet paper behind. So toilet paper is one option. Using a pea cloth or a coola cloth is a second option. If you are using a pea cloth, the proper way to use one, and you can use a microfiber towel, you can use a coola. This is not a coola sales pitch. Is to pat dry. So you're not using it to wipe from front to back like you would with toilet paper. You're basically using it to absorb moisture. So you're more or less holding it in place after you pee. So you're removing the moisture from your body so that it's no longer just sitting in your underwear for days. And then you can wash your pee cloth if needed. You can use it all day long over and over again, but then you can wash it in the evenings. And I usually just use a tiny little dropper bottle and some type of a water bottle to wash mine. You should not wash any pea cloth in natural water sources. So I've heard folks say, oh, I'll just wash it out in a creek or a stream. We're not introducing any urine back into the environment. The last thing that I'll mention for peeing, and this is specifically pertaining to mountaineering, is that a lot of times you're in a harness and you can't just unclip and be off of your rope team. So using something like a pea style or a freshette, there are a whole bunch of different brands out there that make pea funnels. Using something like this with your mountaineering pants is going to be really helpful. The one thing that I will say about using any type of stand-up to pee device is that you absolutely should practice with this before you go out onto the mountain. I'm just, a friend told me this story about how she was up at 13,000 feet on the side of Mount Rainier in a windstorm and decided to use a pee funnel for the first time. That might be a personal story. And it was not pretty because I hadn't taken into consideration the wind speed and wind direction and where I should be aiming. Also, if you are not used to peeing standing up, at least for me personally, I have a really hard time getting going with peeing standing up. And I found that I almost have to kneel down a little bit to actually start peeing. So if you put it in place, you want to have sort of a forward lean, or else it's going to backflow into your pants. So all of this to say, practice first. There's also a company named Nara. It's spelled Gnara. They do make a pair of pants with a pea zipper in the crotch that you could actually unzip while you have a harness on. I don't believe they're like heavier weight pants. So if you were going into a really cold climate, they might not be warm enough. But for like a Pacific Northwest alpine climb, they might be a perfect option for you. So that is peeing. The wonders of peeing outside. Pooping. On to something even more fun. The very first time that I ever pooped in the wilderness, I was terrified, not afraid to admit that, but I've since done it many times and it's not that bad. On a mountain climb, it can be a little bit different. So if you are lucky, you have a base camp where there's a privy, no problem. Just poop in the privy, you're good to go. Some of the climbs here in Washington State, even some of the bigger climbs, like Rainier, and when I did Kulshan climb, I don't know if they still have them up there or not, but when I did it, there was some box toilets that had been placed up there at one point. So depending on where you're going, there might be some toilets available, but many places there are not toilets available. If you are in an area where there is dirt and not snow, and there is no privy available, that is when you would be required to dig a cat hole. So you can use a trowel for that, 6 to 8 inches deep. And a really, really important tip is that you can dig the hole after you poop. This sort of blew my mind when I learned this when I started backpacking. And I can't help but notice all these piles of human feces that are just sort of left around on the trails, often picked up by park rangers, which is pretty gross. And I like to think that these are probably people who the urge to go to the bathroom overwhelmed them suddenly, and digging a 6 to 8 inch deep hole is not easy in dirt. It is actually takes some effort. So if you are somebody who has to poop and you feel like, oh boy, I don't think I can make it through this hole in time to get the poop in there, you can poop on the ground, then dig your hole, then use some sticks or rocks to push it in there and bury it, and it still counts. So the statute of limitations on burying your poop does not end the second it leaves your butt. So that's one consideration for pooping. When we're thinking about cleanliness after pooping, there's a couple ways you can approach it. I will often carry a tiny little bag of wet wipes with me. I will usually dry these out ahead of time so that they aren't quite as heavy. There's also a company named Pact that makes, oh, and I have one of these so I can show everybody. They make these little sort of dehydrated tablets, and you can add water to these, and these become full-sized wet wipes that you could use to clean off. I highly recommend having some type of ability to clean yourself with something wet. You could also use something like a Kulo Clean travel bidet. However, that is definitely going to depend on the temperature of where you're going. Up on at Camp Muir, if it's super, super cold out, squirting your butt with water might not be the best idea. So use your judgment about which method is going to be the best for you. Again, when I am pooping, I've always got, for my peeing, I have my pee cloth, and then I will have my toilet paper for poop. I have my trash bag, and usually a little bag of wet wipes. And then if it's warmer temperatures out, I might bring a little travel bidet. The next consideration for pooping, which definitely applies to mountaineers, is whether or not you're actually going to have to blue bag it. Because I hate to tell all of you, but digging a hole in 6 to 8 inches of snow does not count. That does not count as burying your poop. As nice as that would seem, that doesn't count. And so there are many places where we're actually going to have to pack our poop out with us. So you can use something for that, like a doggy bag. I was talking to Mary and Morgan before we got started today about different types of wag bags. So there's just the wag bag, and you could just search online for this. There's also a different version called the Rest Stop, and I'm going to put that into the chat. Rest Stop. And that's a great option for a wag bag. And then the other little tool that I wanted to share with all of you This is called a go-to, and the website is Go To Outdoor Essentials, and it's the number 2. This, a lot of times when you're blue bagging it, you're pooping on the ground and then using that bag to actually pick it up, which can be a challenge for folks. And then also with the wag bags, there's this idea that you're going to aim and poop directly into the bag itself. This sort of bridges the gap between both options. It's a tiny little sort of cylinder that you can unfold, and then you would put your dog bag in it, and it almost makes a little wilderness toilet for you so that it's easy to poop into it and to tie it up and pack it out with you. But if you know that you're going into a place where you're going to be camping on snow, chances are you will have to pack out your poop. Let me share my screen again. And there's our designer blue bag. That's not actually one that I have. So the final thing that I'm going to talk about is how we handle our periods when we're outside. And this is really important information for everybody, even if you are not a person who's currently having your period. You probably know people that do. My number 1 piece of advice for handling periods in the backcountry is that even if your period finished 2 days ago and you think for certain there's no way you're going to get a period on your backpacking or mountaineering trip, always go prepared just in case. I can't tell you the amount of emails I've received from people who have said, oh, I had to use my Kula cloth as a pad for 7 days. I wasn't expecting my period, but it just showed up. When you are climbing or backpacking, your body is under different types of stress. You might be nervous, you might be sleeping at different times, you're eating different foods, and it can throw your body off a little bit. And if a surprise period shows up, that could definitely contribute to some of that emotional distress. So my best advice is to go prepared, even if you don't think you're going to get your period on the trip. So there's a couple ways of handling periods in the backcountry. Option 1 is to just use traditional hygiene products like pads or tampons. Those can be packed in, but they also must be packed out. They cannot be left in any backcountry toilets, and they cannot be buried because they are not going to just biodegrade. The picture on the screen shows an OPSAC, which is an odor-proof bag. That's really helpful to put any used period items into, because those period items also do need to be stored away from your campsite with your food. So if you're hanging a bear bag or if you have a bear canister, we're going to keep our period supplies out of our backpack or out of our tent once they've been used. The other option is to use some type of a menstrual cup or a disc. This is my personal preferred method because it requires packing in and out a lot less. But I will say, again, just like that pee funnel, you absolutely want to feel comfortable with this item and have practiced with it before your trip. Going on an Alpine mountaineering trip and using a menstrual cup for the first time is not the place to learn how to use a menstrual cup. I have personally found that there is a few-month learning period with getting used to the cups or the discs, and also finding one that fits your body. They're different, they're made differently, they fit different bodies, and it might take a little bit of trial and error. Once you do find one that works for you, you'll handle menstrual blood exactly the same way as you handle poop. So if there is a toilet, you can empty that menstrual cup into the privy, and you can also use your tiny little soap bottle and water bottle to clean it over the privy. If there is no privy or toilet available, again, you are digging a 6 to 8 inch deep cat hole, and you are emptying out the menstrual blood into that cat hole, cleaning your cup or disc over that cat hole, and then covering it up. If you are snow camping and you are using a menstrual cup, then that menstrual blood would need to go into a wag bag and get packed out with you. So if you are camping on snow and this makes you uncomfortable, then using pads or tampons might be a better option for you when you're snow camping than using a cup or a disc. But that's how you handle your period in the backcountry. So pre-trip communication, if you are the person organizing a trip, just simply opening up the conversation to folks in your group, asking them if they have a hygiene plan. You can visit the Leave No Trace website and they have videos talking about how to pee, poop, and period outside. But really, it starts with just asking a question. There are a lot of folks out there, for whatever reason, that feel uncomfortable bringing this topic up. And we have a much better chance of being successful and having a more connected trip if we're all feeling good about our hygiene. So that is all I have about hygiene in the backcountry. And I'm so excited for some of you to get to go climbing. I have had the most magical adventures alpine climbing. And yeah, it's just when you can be out there and feel connected to yourself and to nature and to other people, it's such a beautiful experience. And I think having good hygiene makes the whole experience more of what you want it to be. So thank you.
That was awesome.
Thanks, Mary.
It was so great. Before we pass the baton or the backcountry bidet to Morgan, there was a question in the Q&A that I thought we could answer now. When you were talking about washing your Kula cloth, what sort of soap were you using?
So in this, I have some Bronner's soap.
Okay.
So I just use Bronner's. And one thing I will say about soap is that, and I've talked to the US Forest Service rangers about this pretty extensively, soap is not natural in alpine environments. However, they all have agreed that using a tiny amount on your pea cloth for the purposes of like your own health and wellness and maintaining good hygiene, as long as you're doing it over a durable surface where it's just going to evaporate or disappear, you know, not washing it, sudsing up in a lake, for instance, like doing this over top of a granite slab or over top of a gravel campsite, if possible. That is an acceptable use of soap in the backcountry. But I will also say it's kind of similar to the biodegradable toilet paper. There's a lot of soaps that tout themselves as like, oh, it's a biodegradable soap, and it gives the impression that you can just have a bubble bath in an alpine lake, and that is not accurate. And when I use this, I didn't bring it, couldn't find it, but I even have a tinier container. It's like a 0.5 ounce Nalgene, it's like the tiniest little thing, and I'll just put a couple drops on the Kula and sort of like pour a little bit of water, agitate it really, really well, and squeeze it out. Oh, and one other tip for cleaning. In mountaineering settings, oftentimes it's cold. And so on a backpacking trip, I might hang this out to dry overnight and it dries easily. But if I'm up at, 10,000 feet at Camp Sherman on the side of Mount Rainier, this might not dry really quickly. So what I recommend is squeezing it out as much as possible and then laying it on your thigh. You'll hate me for like a second because it'll be a little bit clammy and cold. Remember, it's clean, slightly damp, but just lay it on your thigh inside your long underwear. When you wake up the next morning, it will be totally dry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. 2 more questions before we go over to Morgan. If you're using a backcountry pit toilet, we talked about no tampons, no pads in those. What about toilet paper in the pit toilet?
You can put toilet paper in them. Yeah, toilet paper is fine. If you want to be ultra pure, you could pack it out. But but I've talked to the park rangers before, and putting a little bit of toilet paper in those is not a problem at all.
Okay. And one final one, we alluded to this with the backcountry bidet baton. That's a tongue twister. What is a backcountry bidet and how is it used?
So the backcountry bidet, this is a small device that has an opening on it on one end, and you basically would have a designated water bottle for this, because remember, you're going to have potential backsplash. So you don't necessarily want to have a water bottle that you would be drinking out of later. So this would go on the top of a water bottle, like a I you'd have to look and see, make sure that it actually fits your water bottle. And I would recommend a squeezable water bottle, like one of the soft platypus water bottles works really well. And it has a really narrow opening so that when you squeeze it, the water is going to come out at high pressure. And then you are just going to put this into position under your butt and squirt. And basically, it becomes a bidet.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay. Well, we're going to pass the backcountry bidet baton to Morgan, who's going to talk a little bit about how she got into guiding, some of her top tips. And Morgan, I'm going to deputize you to also answer the question about how to poop when you're on a rope team.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Anastasia. That was really, really informative. And I got a lot of really cool products out of that. So excited to look more into that. Hi everyone. My name is Morgan. My pronouns are she or they. I am a mountain guide and a ski patroller, avalanche educator. And yeah, I've been guiding for Alpine Ascents for the last 4 years. I started kind of my mountaineering interest when I was super young. I grew up in Colorado, and was super lucky to kind of get to explore the Rockies. I started hiking and mountaineering when I was like really little. I went to a summer camp and got to climb a lot in the summer, and that definitely inspired where I am now. Like Mary said, I took some time to get a degree in college on the East Coast, and then I came out to Washington and was just so inspired by the mountains and the landscape out here. My kind of biggest passion is skiing, so that's what really got me into the career I'm in today. So when I got out here, I was like, man, I want to ski all of the volcanoes, as many as the glaciers as I can. And so that's what got me started. And then I started ski patrolling. And a lot of my friends who were patrollers were also guides. I didn't really honestly know that much about guiding until I lived in Washington. And I think I was just surrounded by a lot of that community, and it was really cool to see how accessible it actually was to me. So yeah, I was a camp counselor at one point, and at the time I was like, this is not guiding, but now I'm like, wow, that was exactly what I was doing. It felt much more like fake career, but it was so real. Taking small children into the wild is just as real as taking adults. So yeah, that's kind of how I got to where I am today. Um, and yeah, I'm gonna go through some tips, as well as just talk about how to support each other um, while we're in the field. And a lot of this is going to be pretty similar to what Anastasia was talking about, but just re-emphasizing the importance of this. A lot of the time on mountaineering trips, we put a lot of emphasis on self-care, and I think hygiene is a really, really big part of that. We may talk more about like, eating and drinking, but this is just as important. And so I think I just really want to emphasize like, do as much as you can pre-trip, because once you get into the field, the more comfortable you feel with your own system, the easier it's going to be. And if you come on a climb with Alpine Ascents, your guides will probably talk about all of this. But even if they don't, sharing your own experience can make somebody else feel that much more comfortable. So yeah, and I do the same thing when I'm on personal trips. So, especially if I'm climbing with a new friend, a new partner, I'm going to start the conversation on day one about hygiene and just like group norms. So whether that's like, all right, we're taking a break. First thing I'm doing is I'm going to the bathroom, taking care of my needs. And same thing, like establishing a camp, you can kind of establish where you're gonna have a place to pee, where you're gonna have a place to poo. I think that's super important for making people feel comfortable, and can inspire folks to, you know, ask questions when they have them. Um, yeah, so something that I love that Anastasia was saying is practicing before you get into the field with whatever device you're going to use. When I started guiding, I did not have a pee funnel, and I just squatted to pee all the time. That's definitely, it works. Even if you use a harness. That being said, um, on all of our glacier trips, you are going to have to pee when you have a harness on, and it is really helpful if you practice beforehand. Um, you'll also probably have time on the trip to practice using the harness before you're actually on the glacier. So just, doing it over and over again, even if you don't have to pee, just kind of getting used to the system of like pulling your pants down with the harness on, figuring out where everything goes, can be really helpful. Um, and then using the pee funnel as well. I love the pee style funnel. Um, something that I do, what's really nice about the snow is you actually can kind of use that and kneel, and you can get comfortable with it kneeling before you start standing. So I think that's cool with that system. Um, yeah, something that Anastasia also had was you'll notice a lot of like baggies. I think that's something that I sometimes forget. But just having lots of like Ziploc bags for your trash, it's nice to have a couple extras just um, in case you want to like, separate different contaminated trash. I think that can be really helpful. And then also the merino underwear can be really helpful because it's quick dry, but it also is a little bit less smelly than other options. And especially if you're going to be like on a super long trip, like if you're going on, a multi-day expedition, that can be really nice because you're going to be in really close quarters with a lot of folks. So yeah, um, talking about close quarters with folks, if you are going to be on a rope team, whether you're on a glacier or on technical rock terrain, um, kind of, yeah, you're inevitably going to be peeing pretty close to somebody else, or potentially pooing close to somebody else. I think people think it's really rare, but it is much more common than you think. And I almost always have somebody on one of my trips, unfortunately, have to take a poo on a glacier. That's okay. You'll be way more comfortable if you do it. So, a couple quick tips. If you are someone who squats to pee, you want to face your fears or face your friends while you're squatting, so that your butt is away from them. That is number one tip. You can also just tell them what you're doing and then everyone can look away. If you're someone who stands to pee, you want to face away from your friends. And same thing if you have to go poop. Hopefully, if you're on a guided trip, like your guide can definitely help facilitate this, but hopefully, you've established some norms already. So if this happens, you can just let everybody know. They can all face away. You can be in the windward direction. um, and then you can just do your business. Again, just like hopefully you've gotten used to the system, pulling your pants down, that kind of thing. But it's the same thing as if you were to use a blue bag, if you weren't on a rope team, weren't using a harness. Just make yourself a comfortable little place to stand and squat, set up your blue bag, um, pull your pants down, do your business, and then move on with your day. And then that's going to be something that you carry off the glacier with you. Um, yeah, that's kind of all I have. Um, there was another question. I can just answer that question if you want, Mary.
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh yeah, suggestions for synthetic underwear. Actually, I'm not sure if I have an answer to that.
Ooh, I have an answer
Um,
for that. And I use it because I love it. Ex officio underwear. It's like travel underwear. And I have gotten away with using just like 2 pairs of underwear for a really long trip. It's not very smelly. It's like easy to clean. And it's very comfortable. So can recommend. I can drop the link in the chat. I see props for Patagonia as well. They have really good synthetic underwear.
yeah, I
I
actually have a
also
couple pairs of
recommend
Patagonia.
Alpine Fit.
Mm.
Yeah, I can share a link for those.
Morgan, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And now we'll be passing the backcountry bidet to Heidi.
Yeah. There is one more question from Jen, that maybe somebody can answer. I'm just getting into mountaineering and I'm discovering that GI issues are something I've been dealing with the physical exertion and altitude. Is there any way to get around that or even more graceful way around such a public pooping circumstance? So we can think on that, if we want to. Do we want some time on that?
We can contemplate, and then
Yes.
we can start with that question when we do our Q&A.
Okay, sounds good. Because I think that's a very, very good question. Okay, well, my name is Heidi Skildum. I work for She Jumps, which is a national organization that aims to get more women and girls in outdoor activities. And by no means am I a hygiene in the high places expert, like those are the other people on this call. But what I'm really excited to talk about is just applaud the other people on this call because for so long, getting into the outdoors was such a one gendered endeavor, right? Like it was just a lot of men going into the backcountry and um, conversations like this that make like adventuring as a person who identifies as female easier. That's the only way we're gonna like what's one of the ways how we're gonna get more and more women outdoors. And so I'm really grateful for like the trailblazers like Anastasia, who is just like taking this conversation front and center. And then I also want to applaud Morgan and Mary for just being like women in this industry that continues to help create these safer spaces for women to find their place in the outdoors. And so She Jumps is one of those nonprofits that is also helping to create these spaces. We get to team up with wonderful guiding companies like Alpine Ascents International to do an array of backcountry experiences. One part of our like puzzles, or one part of our programs are fundraising climbs where people can sign up to climb some of the biggest mountains in the country, such as Rainier or Colshan. We have them in other states as well. And with a group of women, you are climbing up a mountain and raising funds for She Jumps. And it's a really meaningful experience for everybody who is involved. And then if you are not a mountaineer, but still want to just get into backcountry or like get outside more, we have regional volunteers that put on meetups, that put on guide-led clinics, whether it's mountain biking or backpacking or hiking. They're in the winter, a big section of our programming is all like the alpine and backcountry skiing and snowboarding between like alpine school and backcountry skiing clinics. And so again, thank you to the people who are on this call, because that makes we're helping to bring all these people together and hopefully help to make conversations like this just supernatural because, right, everybody poops. Even Girafficorns, which is the She Jumps mascot. It's a little sparkly, but everybody poops. So thank you, everybody.
Oh, wonderful. Wise words. Everyone poops. Should we go into the Q&A? We still have some time left before our lunch break is over. Thank you so much, Heidi. That was awesome. She Jumps is the best. Okay. Now that we've had some time to contemplate the question about getting to mountaineering with the GI issues, is how would we advise this person to, yes, what is our advice? Morgan,
So,
I'm calling on you,
yeah,
Morgan.
well, I was waiting for Morgan to answer. I have a friend who had some pretty serious GI issues and was also a very, very hardcore mountaineer. And she did manage to like balance those things. And I think like as a person who was in the group with her while she was climbing, she was like very upfront with all of us about what she was dealing with ahead of time. And so like we all knew that this was like something that happened and that she went through it. And so all of us then asked her, you know, like what would be the best thing that we could do to support her and help her out.
Yeah.
And so like if we knew that she was pooping, first off, like she would oftentimes have to stop and go to the bathroom like 10 times. And we knew that and nobody ever said anything about it, and we all just like supported her and encouraged her. And when we knew that she had to go to the bathroom, we gave her privacy and space to do that. So I feel like being like choosing people to climb with that you feel comfortable telling that information to is important.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as you get more comfortable too, like I think, I mean, there are definitely ways to make that less public, you know. One is through communication. Another is like if you're on the snow, you can like at your camp actually like build a bathroom. That's something that we try to do on a lot of our mountaineering trips, just to make it a little bit more private for whoever's using it. Um, so yeah, I thanks, Anastasia.
Oh.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about pooping in a harness and just like on a rope team, because it is a little bit of like a cumbersome task, and some of it just is gonna have to like be practicing it and trying it out. But there are a lot of harnesses. The harnesses that we're typically using on glaciers are going to be Alpine harnesses that are pretty like um, functional for this. They're a lot smaller than like a typical rock climbing harness, and it doesn't necessarily seem intuitive that you could just pull your pants down wearing it, but you can. So there's like some of them, you know, there are ways to like actually remove whatever is in the back, like on your butt, but so, like some of them you can literally pull your pants down while you're wearing them, and they can actually stay secure on your waist. Um, so yeah, there are a lot of ways to do it to make it. Some harnesses are easier than others, but um, yeah, you know, try out whatever you have, see how it works, just like in your room at home, and
Mhm.
then you can do it on the glacier.
Do you have a brand that you find to be easier if you're pooping in a harness? Like I'm thinking of like the blue ice ones that have like
Hmm.
the easy to release ones, straps.
Yeah, I honestly think there are a lot of options out there these days. Like most
Cool.
brands are making them. I have a Black Diamond couloir harness, which is like one of the more, you know, tinier harnesses. Like it's very, very lightweight, and so it works really well. It has kind of what you're talking about, where there's a buckle in the back, and you can actually like unbuckle the two little bungees. But yeah, blue ice is great. I think Petzl has a really good option as well. And it's going to be called like Alpine harness or glacier harness.
Mhm.
And also, yeah, unless it's like a very emergent poop, in a lot of situations, like if you're taking a break, you might not actually have to stay on the rope as well. So that's, yeah, an option sometimes.
Wonderful. Oh, great conversation. I love this. Do we have any other questions? Pop them in the Q&A box. No other questions? Oh, it could be that our work here is done for this Tuesday afternoon. But we will do a quick icebreaker for all of us. So if people have questions that are still percolating, one has come in. How do you pick a good poop spot in a busy trail? Anyone?
I would say at least 200 feet or more away from natural water sources. And I mean, looking for like, that can be challenging sometimes. I mean, sometimes you just have to find a tree that you can sort of duck behind. It really varies on, where you are. I'm trying to think of odd places that I've pooped before, and um
All the
also,
places I've pooped.
yeah, all the places. I think that's going to be the name of my biography when I write it. All the places I've pooped and peed. um I would say that, also considering that, like, a durable surface, like, am I not trampling a meadow, to get off trail? I'm always keeping those things in mind. If you are not hiking alone, another way of doing it might be to have a little bit of a lookout, on one end or the other, that could watch out for folks coming around the trail. And I know that in the backcountry, if there is a privy, the sort of universal sign that it's in use is like maybe leaving a jacket close to the entrance to sort of quote unquote warn somebody that somebody's out there sitting on the privy, because obviously there's no walls around it. So once somebody's at the privy, they're just going to see you sitting there. I guess I've also found too that as I have gotten more and more comfortable peeing and pooping outside, and also just like talking about hygiene with folks, I have felt more and more at ease doing things like pooping and peeing outside. And yeah, I feel like there's probably some trails here in Washington State, like Mount Si, where it'd be tough to find a private spot.
One that I had, and Morgan, when you said like camp counseling, like that's where a lot of my experience leading comes from. And one thing that I would always share is like, try, it's like my mother's voice is in my head, like just try, instead of waiting until you really have to go, which I think a lot of us do because you're in a group and you think that like, oh, I don't want to slow anybody down. Like we just stopped it, and like, so I'm just going to hold it. And then like, if you're on the brink, like I think that 250 feet or getting off trail and like all that stuff like kind of goes out the window, and you're just like, I have to go right now, and like you're that's kind of where I find that the greatest like oopsie whoopsies happen, whereas like even before like just like trying at any break, just like, and even think of it as like I'm traveling with this big group, possibly. And this is the one moment that I get to have all by myself. And I'm just going to go check out a tree, like real far away. I'm just going to take a nice little 10-minute walk in the woods and see what happens, and like come back smiling because something did happen and you feel great.
I love it. Just try. We have one final question in the chat. Would you say it's better to leave any additional soaps, etc., at home? I just always worry about the impact on the ecosystem. I don't bring anything now, and am trying to encourage others to be very mindful of our impact in the backcountry. What do we think?
So I would say that if you feel fine, like just rinsing out a pea cloth with water and, you know, agitating it with your hands and rinsing it, that's probably fine. I would agree that it is not good to introduce anything unnatural into the ecosystem. If you are a person who feels that it is very important to use 1 drop of soap on your kula or your menstrual cup to clean it, and you're using a very gentle soap over a durable surface, I would say that's probably having minimal to no impact. And that the negative impact of you being concerned about cleanliness and your hygiene would be like sort of canceled out in that case. So I feel like it's a combination of like personal preference, and also if you do decide to bring a tiny little bit of soap, being very mindful about how you're using it, and not introducing anything into the natural water system particularly. So I think you would be totally fine not bringing any soap and just rinsing stuff off with water.
Nice. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you hang your kula cloth or pea cloth out on the back of your backpack and it's a sunny day, there is some like UV.
Yeah, there's
UV.
the UV rays have like a, I would say like, I wouldn't say that it just like sterilizes it, but the kula cloth is antimicrobial, and that's actually not because of the pee. Like you aren't actually trying to protect yourself from uncleanliness due to pee. The antimicrobialness is there so that if you lay your backpack down in the dirt, it's not picking up anything unnecessarily or like becoming a harbor for all sorts of different bacteria. So yeah, I think if you could like lay your pea cloth out in the sun and rinse it really well with just some water, I think that'd be a great option. And you can get a menstrual cup really clean with just water as well. When I'm at home, I usually am just rinsing mine out with water in a sink.
All right. Well, we are coming close to the noon o'clock hour, so we will say farewell to all of you. Thank you so much for tuning in. All of our wonderful panelists, thank you so much for taking time out of your Tuesday to come have this awesome conversation. I know I am super psyched. I wouldn't say that I'm psyched to go out and poop in the woods necessarily, because I actually don't like doing that. I'm like trying to get over it, but I feel more confident. So one final question from me to all of you to like leave us out today is, where is the most beautiful place that you have pooped in the backcountry? And I will start, this was my question. In the North Cascades, at a place called Boston Basin, which is really beautiful. That's where you would go if you're gonna climb Forbidden Peak or Sahale. There's this really nice backcountry pit toilet. I mean, I'm someone who loves sitting down when I poop. I'm like not trying to do squats all the time. And you like sit down, there's like marmots whistling, you get this really great view of Johannesburg. Hands down, best poop I've ever had. Whoever wants to go next.
I can. So my most memorable and beautiful poop, it was probably while climbing Glacier Peak. There's this ridge as you're sort of getting closer and closer to the summit, and there's this glacier like next to the ridge, and it was one of those moments where it was like I didn't have to go, and then all of a sudden emergency. Like there was no like time for me to plan for this, and I sort of jumped behind this ridge to take care of business, and I just remember like looking out of the Cascades thinking like, wow, this is like the most beautiful place I've ever gone to the bathroom. And then as I emerged from the ridge, there was two other folks in my group also emerging from the same ridge. So we ended up calling it Poo Ridge because apparently like three of us all had the exact same idea at the same time. I don't know what it was about that ridge. So
I can go next. Kind of similarly, I do this like big relay race out in Montana every year. And we're going through like 7 different mountain ranges, and like you get really comfortable pooping and peeing like really close to your teammates at kind of at all times, and the days start really early. And so I just have a lot of memories of like staring out at the Sphinx, like going to the bathroom and, using sticks or whatever to like put it back in, and it's like sunrise and it's beautiful and we're exhausted and also relieved because I won't need to poop anymore. It's like got it done in the morning. So that's always really beautiful.
Amazing. I've definitely pooped in some weird places. I can't say really any of my like blue bag experiences on glaciers were the most pleasant experiences. They're usually not planned. But like Mary said, there are quite a few really, really epic pit toilets in the North Cascades. If you don't know about them, you should go find them. One of my favorite spots is on the Sulphide route on Mount Shuksan. Super beautiful views. And yeah, I have a little note in my phone of all the beautiful pit toilets, some of my favorite spots in Washington. So it's good to keep track.
Stay tuned for that coffee table book coming soon. With that note, thank you all so much. This webinar has been recorded and we'll post it on the Alpine Ascents blog like later on this week. Thank you to all our great panelists. Thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you in the mountains, pooping or not. Yeah, whatever.
thanks, Mary.
Bye.
Thank
Bye,
you,
everybody.
everybody. Bye.